You've just stepped onto the pedestal,
where we talk everything entrepreneurship, growth, and support for women of color. I'm Lady.
I'm Delise.
And I'm Melissa, and we're excited to have you with us.
Welcome to another episode with Pedestal Group. Today we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and the impacts it's had on entrepreneurs and just business in totality. I'm Lady, and I'm here with my awesome co-host. Welcome, girls.
Happy to get together again and do some more chatting.
Yes. And such an important discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been living it for months now, it's pretty much since March. And so a lot has happened across the world in both, the corporate and public and private sectors. And, I can't think of any one person that can really walk around saying they have not been impacted by it. So it's been a lot.
Yep, and so many changes from, everybody. I think everybody thought when everybody got shipped home from their offices that everybody was just going to be away maybe for 2 weeks or a week. And then it just rolled into another month and a month. It hasn't ended.
I mean, when you even think about just the medical fields, I mean, they're doing teleconferences now. They had to, because of COVID, they had to totally reimagine how can they see someone if they're concerned about their own health. Can they get COVID? And I think that that's something that we really, just as entrepreneurs and just all organizations, really have to kind of adjust, right? And have to reimagine, how can they reach their market differently, because people are going to be requesting that, and how are they going to reach out to the workforce and different talents. And so it's incredible that this is what we're living through, because I mean, there is such aside from the entrepreneurship part, it's such a health crisis that, we're going through.
Also, then some of the negatives would be all those people that do not have a job anymore because of COVID, the waiters and in-person jobs, that even the wedding planning industry, all the 99% of our weddings were moved to 2021 because of COVID. So it's affected photographers, DJs, all that second income that a lot of or main
rely on.
It's gone. And I don't know if I feel like it's starting up a little bit now, but, the first half of the year, it's basically gone.
Yeah. And to Melissa's point, the recovery of some people, I think they did an analysis on even restaurants, and most restaurants had 18 days worth of savings to keep their restaurants alive, right? Wow. On average. So once that was up, that was it. And so a lot of these industries too, to Melissa's point, is that even if it's picking back up now, too much time might have passed for business, for some of them to recover. It might have been just I was operating on zero for this long. I can't even afford to relaunch my business. I can't even afford to pick this stuff back up. And some restaurants are just closed for good because they just couldn't sustain it. They can't pay the rent. They can't, without the revenue that was coming in from people physically going in and eating, the food, etc. So for some people, this COVID has had and will have a permanent impact on their future and their sustainability, and if they're able to even make it into the next year. Our weddings were just postponed, but if they were canceled outright and we had to give back all of our, revenue, luckily we have 9-to-5s, but where would we have been if we were fully on payroll on that? So there's a lot of planners that gave up their 9-to-5s, and that's what they were doing. So I don't even know how these past couple months they were thriving or paying for, managing their mortgages and all that. It's tough. So I guess, that could lead us into what advice do we have, for entrepreneurs in this space?
So that's such a great segue. We actually created a list of tips that we feel that would really help just a lot of entrepreneurs out there really like stay relevant. One of the main things is, really coming from branding and design is that you really have to look at your own brands, look at how, what your website looks like, what your materials, what is your brand communicating about yourself and the services that you're offering. Is it relevant? Is it still relevant in this COVID age? Do you need to actually revamp it now so that now you're reaching a whole other market, that you want to make sure you look at those things.
I think if a lot of your, like, for the wedding industry, and that's just the one I could use as an example, like right now everybody's down. So photographers and wedding planners, just looking at their website coming up, doing like a refresh for their website. Like we're working on that as well.
Yeah.
So we've actually taken this time now that we're down to just, come up with a different logo, a material, and like Lady said, the branding.
And all the things you wanted to do, because, it almost makes me laugh a little because a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs are like, I don't even have the time to update these materials. Well, it's like, well, now you've been given like an entire year to do that. So I think it's a really pertinent point, Lady, and why it's, one of the first points that we're bringing up is that now we've been afforded this time. It's really go back and do all the things that you wanted to do for your business, and so revamp those materials and make your business more efficient, or change up recreate your packages if the package is something that you offer, or do that thing that you always wanted to do with your branding, because now is not that the downtime that you have now is the time to do it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And your brand is the first thing that people are, going to associate with you. That's the first interaction with, your organization, business. So that's definitely the first place we want to start.
Yeah. And, that kind of leads into sort of the second thing that we came up with, or the second tip that we'd share, especially for entrepreneurs, is, if you can't beat them, join them. And so what does that mean? And what we found, especially in these times, it's COVID, of course, is something that is not positive at all. It has caused, people have lost lives, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think if we all had the opportunity to opt to have or not have COVID, everyone would say, well, no, we would prefer not to have it and not to ever have had it. But when things like this happen, sometimes it forces you to adapt your business. And so that's what we mean by if you can't beat them, join them. So sorry to do wedding planning again. I'll see if I find another industry as an example. But large gatherings are not allowed, right? You cannot get a bunch of people together to celebrate something like a wedding. So, what does that do for your industry? Well, it really created the birth of micro weddings. And I mean, micro weddings, it's not a totally new concept, but not a lot of people did it. It was always this kind of elite chic thing that people did. I'm just gonna have a small wedding with 20 people, and it was this thing that somebody chose to do. Whereas now it's like, some people are engaged for a while now, and they're like, I'm not changing my wedding date. So I'm sorry, 150 of you are not coming. I'm going to do 20 people, 20 of my closest friends and family. I am getting married on my date. And what that does is it gives birth to micro weddings, because people, you still have to decorate. You still have to get food for these 20 people. You still want to entertain them. You still have to get your dress. You still have to do all the things that a planner would do for you, for example. And a lot of these vendors, you still need a photographer and all this stuff, but you just need it on a smaller scale for less time, for example, right? And so that really gave birth or a lot of heavy momentum behind micro weddings. So as an entrepreneur, that's something, or as entrepreneurs, that's something Melissa and I had to discuss is, okay, if we can't use our main service, well, what does that mean for us as planners and designers, and wedding designers? Is how do we make sure that we're servicing smaller events? How do we adapt to what people are asking for? So people want, it's not easy to set up a very chic or elegant wedding in your backyard, and they still need help to do that. And so how do we make sure that we're adapting to that trend and servicing our clients in the same way? And so that's really one of our tips, is just look around at what it's done to whatever industry you're in as an entrepreneur, and maybe try to figure out, well, how can I join that? If you're a photographer, you might say, okay, I can't charge my $4,000 package to go out and take photos for 8 hours. Somebody might only need me for 3. So you could say, okay, well, can I do some smaller packages and offer it and try to just get volume out there to say, all right, well, here's a $1,500 package, and it's going to include engagement photos and 3 hours on your big day, right? And so it's important to think about what is happening to the industry that you're in, and how can you adapt your services to meet that?
Right. And then it's also keeping the engagement going. So, marketing, if you were using Instagram or Facebook to market for you, and maybe that's not an option for you now because, there's not a lot of income or extra money coming in, then it's, using a Hootsuite and creating your own post and scheduling those to go out on a certain time. You want to just keep trying to market, and so that people don't forget you, and so that when things do pick up, they'll be like, oh, I remember that company that came up, and they'll reach out to you. So maybe just doing some marketing on your own if you're not able to keep going.
That's a good point about staying relevant and keep, they always say, like, even if you don't get nobody reaches out to you from an ad, doesn't mean that people didn't see it. And so that's a good point Melissa's making about you have to stay relevant. You have to stay out there, because if I was engaging with a company and the company went dark, then all of a sudden when things pick back up, all of a sudden now you have something to say. So you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that, to Melissa's point, it's out there and consistent, so you're in people's minds, especially when people are down and spending so much time on their phones. You want to be in people's faces.
So the fourth tip is all about staying motivated. We're going through such a health crisis. It could totally weigh you down. You can get completely wrapped up in the news and just, all the sadness, aspect that's going on, people dying. It's a real problem. The fact is that we do need to keep going. So in order to do that, we have to stay motivated. Is it listening to podcasts that are motivating? Is it listening to, different videos, different motivational speakers? And I think the most important part is to take action in staying motivated. Reach out to people if you don't feel well. I mean, now, we're talking about, psychologists are doing teleconferences. Because it's a very real thing, and it's something that's giving people a lot of anxiety. So if you're worried about your business, worried about your finances, you really have to talk to someone and maybe engage a mentor, maybe engage someone that is in your field to see how they're doing. Maybe they can give you tips specifically for your field. But I think it's just super important to do the work to staying motivated, so that we at least work hard and try hard to make sure to pull out of this.
Right. And then our tip number 5 is keep in contact with your existing clients and past clients, shooting them a quick email to check in how they're doing, and to see if there's anything else that you could do for them. That will just keep them fresh in their mind when the time does come where they need, your services.
My daughter's orthodontist would send us, a YouTube video, and kind of would tell us hey, there's a message from the doctor saying, we're still here. We're still servicing emergency clients. Just keeping us informed as to when they will be back open for regular services. And I really liked that, because we're paying for these braces, and you're like, when is she going to get checked out? Whatever, so it was important that they communicated to us what their plan was, if there was something that, specifically for our state, if the governor for our state, decided to keep some things closed, they would shoot out a message saying, hey, as the governor has decided to still close dental offices, so we cannot, your appointment that you had, we're gonna have to reschedule it. And I just felt good about that. So you didn't feel like you weren't aware, and so they did a really great job at communicating.
Another one of the things that we came up with, I guess tip number 6 is just keeping informed as to what's going on. You're not doing yourself essentially any justice if you're not aware of what's happening around, right? So it's one thing for COVID to happen and, a governor might say, okay, your state is closed or the city is closed or a town is closed or this, what phase your industry is in. But if you're not paying attention to that or paying attention to how things are evolving over time, you're not going to be able to pick yourself up as quickly as other businesses are, right? And so keeping informed is incredibly important as an entrepreneur. So get on the mailing lists, keep yourself notified, get notifications going for your state websites or your .gov websites, so that you are constantly updated when things are changing. Again, in entertainment or industries where there's a lot of heavy gatherings, it's important to pay attention to one day today, they might say you can't have more than 50 people in one place. And then tomorrow they might say, well, actually, for everything north of this town, we can have 200 people. That's very different for how your business is going to operate. So if you get a client that wants something further or in a town that allows it, you're able to properly service and not say, well, everything is closed, right? And so you really have to pay attention and keep yourself informed. That's going to really get you on your feet much quicker. And so apart from just being informed on things like your industry is what incentives are there out there, or I shouldn't even use the word incentive. What support is there out there? Yeah. Or resources that you can take advantage of. Right. And so the small business loans, and economic recovery or disaster grants and all these types of things that are made available is, if, keeping yourself informed helps you get in line for these things, in time. Like Melissa and I did not do a good job of that earlier this year. One, because we weren't informed, we didn't even know they existed. And then when we found out they existed and we made the time to sit and really figure out what we could apply for, it was closed. Too many applications, right? And of course, barring the companies that should not have applied for it in the first place, and left spaces for companies like ourselves. Had we known to keep informed during this time, we could have gotten on that train and we could have gotten some support, that would have helped. Luckily, again, we just had postponements and not many, one cancellation, I think, or something like that. But, where, we were still able to have our revenue come in. I mean, it's not as heavy as it would have been if the year was normal, but had we known or had we kept ourselves informed as entrepreneurs, I think we would have been better off. And so it's definitely important, no matter the industry you're in, is pay attention to what's out there, pay attention to resources, pay attention to what's happening in your industry, in your state, in your country. Just keep informed. It's going to help you get back on your feet much faster.
Absolutely. And I think, like you were talking about resources, there's so many Facebook groups that you can be a part of, and they've been very helpful. I think even with our podcast, we joined a Facebook group that was all about podcasts. So right there, it just in general keeps you in the know. Right. Okay, someone's doing that. That can be helpful for our own podcast. Right. So I think the sharing of information has been really great, especially during this time. Yeah, absolutely. And going into that, like the tip number 7 is brainstorm new ideas. Like we keep saying, we're adjusting, we're adapting. And the only way we can do that is to brainstorm. Look at what ideas could work, try them out. It won't kill anyone. And if you try them out, you can say, okay, this worked, this doesn't work. And it may be just for this time, things may change, but, I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's a comedian in LA. So like you said, Delise, the entertainment business has suffered a lot. What she started doing Zoom comedy shows.
There you go.
And, it's such a different, and she, I've heard, I saw a couple of comedians do this, and I've heard them say, this is such a different avenue. We're so used to having kind of like feeding off of, the audience. So it really teaches them another skill.
Right.
So I think that's really great.
There's nobody there to make fun of, huh?
Exactly. Exactly. And
No,
then
yeah, they love that. Yeah.
so it's interesting, like maybe it helps them with their acting skills, like maybe now they don't have an audience, or they'll just have like people looking at them and be more comfortable on screen. So it's just about brainstorming new ideas as to and look at what other people are doing, seeing, what other industries are doing. Cause sometimes I do see that, like, we may get stuck in our own industry. And if you see some of like a larger organizations, they'll look to see, okay, what's the medical field doing? What's the wedding planning doing? Because there can be a little nugget that can help you in your own business. And
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes back to the engagement and marketing yourself and just revamping your brand. So, just to share my own experience with Style Hook, it's actually been a journey, because even before COVID, I was trying to figure out where would I want to take Style Hook. And same as what Delise and Melissa did, I was working on my logo, changing that. And then I had the most issue with staying motivated, because again, I was like, right when I was going to start like advertising, hey, I can come to your house, I can come do this, I can come do different things. Nobody wants you to come to their house right now or anything, or there was no shopping. I'll be honest, at one point, I think the motivation part was such a problem, because for myself, I was like, who cares about how they look right now? Who cares about their brand right now? Who cares about that right now? Everybody is just so worried about staying alive and their loved ones and, what's going on in this economy. It's taken me a while to actually get out of that, and realizing that, and this is the part about revamping and adjusting, that it's like, people have to be on Zoom. People have to be on Zoom with their coworkers, and I hear the stories that they're like, well, there's one person who gets dressed up and then other people are in their pajamas, or when it comes to the branding aspect, I had definitely a hard time with the motivation part. But I think what's great is that what came even during this whole time was Pedestal. So I think that it really helped to kind of talk these things through with you guys. That helps.
Styling could still be very important too now, because honestly, like, everybody after a while, like rolling out of bed and, being in your pajamas all day, it kind of like does something to like your mental health, I think, to a certain point.
You feel like there's no stop and start of your day.
No, and I think, what's interesting for that, I always wondered about, the fashion and styling industry in terms of, when things pick back up. Like, I'm so angry. I'm looking in my closet and I'm like, none of this crap is going to be in style. And I just bought them last year and I was looking forward to wearing them this year. And it's like, we got to revamp our entire wardrobes. I want things to look cute with a mask. I got to get masks to match this stuff. You know what I mean? And so, it's just, even for that industry, I'm thinking, I'm sure designers, if you think of this is not a wedding planning industry. I just thought about it though, but for wedding dress designers, they come out with like their spring catalog and their fall this and that, and I'm like, what spring dresses you coming out with in 2020 and nobody's getting married? Like what you know what I mean? So it's even fashion designers or brands that come out with clothes for styling, et cetera. It's like, well, what are you coming out with this Christmas? And does it matter? Are people buying it? How
are you putting it on hold?
How do you even know what to design? What trend? How do you even know what trend is there if people aren't out there? Everyone is out here. I think at least a decline by 50% of people dressing fashionably. They're just putting on their sweatpants and their whatever to go right down the street because they're like, who am I dressing up for? Everyone's face is covered. I'm not in a bar. I'm not trying to pick up anyone right now. So how do they even know what to design?
And I think that's the whole part of adapting, right? Like, and brainstorming new ideas, because they're a business, the fashion definitely took a hit. Like, all the stores were closed. Mm-hmm. I remember going back, I think, to Zara's, and I'm like, is this last year's stuff or what? Like, you know, or I went back and I'm like,
50% off.
where's all the summer? Yeah, I was like, where's all the summer clothes? Why does there still fall from like when we were inside?
Right.
Get rid of their inventory.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
Absolutely.
it is interesting how they have to reimagine, you know, fashion shows, how stylists have to reimagine doing, you know, possible consultations over online, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Zoom. And so it is interesting aspect of how to reimagine and see what works in this world now.
Yeah,
This world of COVID. But I do think that I think the takeaway that we want to make sure everyone takes is that there's always a way.
Right.
You know, like I shared my experience, you know, I was not feeling motivated, but there is a way. There is a way to, like, you know, evolve. And I think we always have to be open to evolving. You know,
Right.
it is very sad to see that restaurants have closed their, you know, their doors after 20, 30 years plus. You know, and I think the one thing is for us to say, you know, advise is, well, it's horrible. What is a takeaway, and you know, where are you taking it next?
Yeah. So, hopefully, you know, for our listeners, this was actually helpful. You know, that our 7 sort of tips or if you've thought about them all, that's fantastic. You're ahead of the game. You're doing the right things. And, you know, if you have additional tips, you know, once we post this up and, you know, or look us up on our Facebook or our Instagram, and feel free to share comments or send us an email at pedestalgroupinfo@gmail.com. You know, we'd be happy to kind of hear your suggestions and share. And so let's take the conversation even off of the podcast as well. And we look forward to interacting with you all. But hopefully this was insightful.
Thanks for listening. For upcoming events, spotlights, and everything in between,
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.